Hello, my name is Ash, and I am so fucking afraid. In order to fully explain what I'm about to do here, I have to take you back to May of 2022. I have been planning to start this YouTube channel that I just started like a few months ago for like almost 2 years at this point. This is something I've been wanting to do forever. And what I am about to embark on was the very first idea I ever came up with for this channel. Back in May of 2022, going even further back in time to since I was a wee lad, I have always been horrifically afraid of anything having to do with scary shit. If it says that it's scary, it probably made me cry at least once. Let me tell you, man, there are so many movie trailers and things like that that would genuinely freak me out for months. When I was in middle school, I was desperately paranoid that Jigsaw was real and I was going to die. And so as a result, and this has pretty much always been the case since elementary school, I vowed to myself that I would never touch anything horror related in my fucking life. But in May of 2022, I changed that. I said, okay, I am going to promise myself that I will watch 100 horror movies, 100 of them. Now with time, this idea evolved. And so now we're doing it. We're fucking doing it. We're doing this shit. Let's go. Let's go. We're fucking doing it. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. This whole thing is gonna be a big series I'm gonna be doing where every entry that I make in this being the first entry, is going to contain a list of 5 different horror movies, all building up to the 100th horror movie that I watch as I hopefully become a horror fan. Spoiler alert, I enjoy horror now. I've watched like 27 of them. I enjoy horror. I think horror is pretty cool. But I didn't, when I was starting off, I really kind of didn't think that horror was all that cool, if I'm being honest with you. I thought it kind of sucked. I thought it kind of like made me like piss my pants and poop and cry and that kind of shit. So we are going to begin to embark on this journey that I'm going to be taking alongside you guys as we make our way through my first 100 horror movies. A few things to note. I'm going to make this interesting. I've made benchmarks for this shit. Every 25th entry that I make in this series is going to be its own dedicated video to one series. For the 25th movie, I'm going to be watching both of the new It movies, the newer ones with the one kid from Stranger Things. For the 50th, I'm going to be watching the entire Jigsaw franchise. And for the 75th, I'm going to be watching the entire Terrifier franchise. And then we're gonna top it all off with the 100th movie, Martyrs. That one. The one everybody fucking talks about. The one that supposedly makes you vomit profusely. That one, that's gonna be the 100th one. So, if you want to see me torture myself for views, go ahead. Like and subscribe, you guys! Do that shit. You should like and or subscribe. That's cool. Awesome. Now, basically, the way that this series is gonna work is, again, there's gonna be 5 different movies that I'm gonna be watching in these, except for those occasional 25th benchmark series videos, which will be their own separate thing. Also, as I'm reviewing these, I'm going to be leaving a few different keynote things in the corners of the screen for you. Over here is going to be my favorite horror movie. This is just the one that I enjoyed the most. Over here is going to be the one that I have found to be the most viscerally terrifying. This one is the worst one to watch. If you want to die, watch this one. But now, if we're gonna do this, we gotta do it right. Boom! Did I scare you? This bit sucks. I'm turning the lights back on.
Brazil! It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper and Heavy D up in the limousine, hanging pictures on my wall. Every Saturday, rap attack Mr. Magic Molly Mall.
Hey guys, hi, hey, it's me from Ash. It's me, Ash, from the future here. I wanted to pop in really quick. Sorry I'm being quiet. Don't mean to be quiet, but hi. I'm going to be popping in here occasionally. I have a little bit of stuff to add on today, just kind of forgot to mention, I just kind of wanted to say, like, hey, first of all, full spoilers for every movie that I'm mentioning here. Complete, full fucking spoilers. Okay, also, in the description, right? In the description, there will be a list of trigger warnings for each movie that I feel needs it. If you have issues with stuff like that, I don't want to fuck you up for real. Like, I don't actually want to fuck you up. So, with that in mind, just take a look down there if you feel like you need it.
Alright, so the way that I wanted to approach starting this off was I wanted to kind of gradually indoctrinate myself into this horror fandom that exists. I thought back to my very first experiences with horror, that being primarily when I was a kid, 3rd grade, 4th grade. I was in school, and every Wednesday my teacher would play the same like 3 or 4 Goosebumps episodes, and that honestly might have been the whole reason why I hated horror. Just because of like the exposure to that shit at such a young age, and then on top of that, having a friend who just wouldn't shut the fuck up about Jeff the Killer. So that was a formative experience for me growing up. But I kind of wanted to expose myself to those formative experiences that for a lot of people like opened up the realms of horror to them. And what better way to do that than with scary stories to tell in the dark. For the blissfully unaware out there, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is most notably a book series. It kind of was the Goosebumps of the 90s in a way. Except the key difference is that these stories were much more famous for their illustrations than they were the actual stories themselves. In fact, even growing up, I would just see these illustrations on the internet, not necessarily reading the books, and that just wrecked me emotionally. And so why not start here? Why not start here? Because they did in fact make a movie about these books. And honestly, it was pretty cool. Legitimately, this was a fun as fuck movie when I first watched it. Now, you're probably asking, what's the plot? Well, the story revolves around the mysterious, elusive author Sarah Bellows. Her spirit, from what I understand, essentially possesses the book Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Now, eventually, this group of kids in this, from what I know now, Stephen King-inspired ragtag team of losers come together and find this book and do the thing that initiates the bad things that happen in the book. Basically, one of them says like this key phrase, and then for like some reason, the book just wants to murder them now because like, sure. Basically, various stories end up getting mysteriously written inside of this book that feature different members of this group as the protagonist that dies. They are the characters in their own scary story. And so as this story gets written out in this mystery book, the character who the book is basically targeting gets attacked in the exact same way that the book is writing about, which honestly is such a really cool concept to me. Just as a horror premise, that seems really fucking interesting, and I really enjoyed just that concept. This idea of a mysterious figure telling the people viewing this book how you are going to die is really kind of terrifying. And the fact that so much of what the book says is decided already, basically the second the book writes your name, you're fucking doomed. Like, there's no escape from that once your story has begun. That is terrifying. That is, like, horrible to think about. The movie itself really does hold up to its premise by allowing for some shockingly emotional reactions from the story. You see some pretty realistic depictions of the fear these kids are experiencing from what's happening to them. There's also a scene where you hear the audio of the author of the book, Sarah Bellows, basically being viciously tortured, which is a pretty intense and ballsy move from a PG-13 PG-13 horror. You basically hear these like tortured screams of the author, who you find out is like being abused by their family. She is basically being tortured with electrotherapy, and this is played on a wax cylinder. What eventually ends up happening is this character is basically being interrogated, and eventually it morphs into a thing where she, through the wax cylinder that is already recorded, begins to tell the next scary story about one of the kids in the present. It's so freaky, dude. Also, the various monster sequences that do come up were kind of shockingly intense. Maybe I got like kind of desensitized as I progressed through horror, but I remember these jump scares being some of the most intense that I had seen out of any of the movies I've seen so far. Again, the first 27. These jump scares really kind of outdid the more intensive ones that exist in more of the like horror movie canon, like Halloween or The Conjuring, which I have seen. Also, a lot of the death scenes in this movie are really kind of strangely fantastical. There's this fantasy element to a lot of what happens. There's this one bully trope character who gets turned into a scarecrow, and you see like straw coming out of this dude's mouth. It's a really cool scene. It's a really neat effect. Very hit or miss if you enjoy that more fantastical aspect or not in your horror. There's also a really strange scene where a monster basically keeps trying to hug this one character, and when they do, the hug absorbs this kid into their fucking stomach. However, all this being said, there are definitely some pretty solid criticisms that I have with the movie too. First of all, there's a lot of writing elements that are pretty fucking over the top and kind of take me out of the experience in a way. The main protagonist of the movie at one point says the line, "You don't read the book reads you," and I laughed out loud when that happened. And honestly, it's not even so much that it's just a corny phrase, but that doesn't even mean anything, because it's not like these stories are designed to target them on an emotional level or anything like that. They're just killing them. Right? It's not testing their morals or anything like that and predicting things that they'll do. Well, I mean, it is predicting things they'll do, but like, point is, it's not testing them in that way. What does this line mean? It's just like a killing book. It's a book that kills people. Like, come on. There's also this like one point where they try to address societal racism in the 1960s, but they don't ever really address it. What happens is basically you see one scene where there's a hate crime, and it's just kind of there to give a bully trope character a motive and not really do anything else. The movie doesn't really do anything substantial with it, which I think kind of sucks, and is something that you will see continued on as we go through this series, apparently. Apparently this is like a common thing that movies do, I guess. You're pretty much just using your time period setting to essentially make your audience watch a minority get hate crimed for some reason. Like, what are we doing here? Overall though, it's a pretty solid movie. It was a really solid intro into horror that, despite my criticisms of it, was really fun. It was a really just dumb fun movie. Some good shit to throw on for Halloween. I don't have much more to say other than that. I do think that the way that they blended all of these different famous like scary story monsters into a single movie was like a really clever way of approaching this narrative. It's not necessarily just a series of different movies that you're watching. What do they call that? Fuck. Overall, I'm gonna say 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. Now, we're gonna get into this other movie that I watched legitimately right after I watched Scary Stories. And it is the complete fucking opposite of everything that Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was. The Platform. While this movie is still really enjoyable, it's enjoyable for a list of entirely different reasons than Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was. Basically, you don't have a lot of monsters or anything like that. You don't have these huge over-the-top fantasy world ordeals. Instead, you've just got a bunch of murders, a lot of death. a whole lot of death. Death is pretty cool in this movie. And not only that, but when you're talking about aesthetics too, Scary Stories was very open. You really got to like see the whole world that exists around these characters, and you get to see the town that they live in. And again, because of that, it felt very open of a horror movie, where with the platform, everything feels condensed, isolated, cramped in, and cold. In fact, the entire movie, you never go outside of this one building. All you see is just these very dense and cold, complex settings, very like brutalist architecture kind of vibes, and you just don't leave that for the entire film, and it makes it, again, very isolated. This movie, conversely to Scary Stories, is a very politically driven film. It uses its narrative to draw a pretty heavy parallel to governmental systems. Then it's like they also contrast those governmental systems with how human nature is meant to behave. Basically, what this movie is setting out to do is to say how human nature in and of itself is designed to create class systems. Now, I do legitimately really appreciate what this movie is trying to say politically. I do think that there are a lot of moments where it comes off as though it's trying to beat you over the head with its politics, which I don't mind, because if you mind that, you're strange to me. Art is in and of itself going to be political, and if you don't like politics in your shit because you can't hear opinion, you're weird and strange, and I don't like you very much. Basically, though it does feel kind of over the top in its politics, it didn't really affect my enjoyment of the movie in the slightest. Maybe if you disagree with the politics and you think that, hey, societal structure, capitalism, and people starving are cool things, maybe you won't like this movie that much. But as someone who thinks that people starving on the streets kind of sucks and is a bad thing for society, and the fact that our governmental system just doesn't do shit to help that, I kind of thought that this movie was pretty solid. Now, for the plot of this movie. Basically, two inmates are placed together inside of this vertical shaped prison system tower thing called a vertical self-management center. Basically, rooms are stacked above each other, and each room has two inmates inside of it and a hole going through the top and bottom of each floor. Through this hole, food is delivered on this platform. I said the thing, you guys, they said the thing. Food is delivered on this platform that descends down with the food. Now, what's worth noting, there's only one giant buffet thing that people are getting, right? So as it goes down, the first floor gets it first, the second floor gets it second, so on and so forth. Now, each room has 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that to eat whatever the fuck they want, which means that since it only comes once a day, they eat a lot of the food. That shit descends down, and as it goes on, it's more and more picked off, and more food is gone now. So eventually, once it gets down to the lower floors, lo and behold, there's not a whole lot of food left. And so the people on the bottom floors have to, like, cannibalize each other and shit, which is awesome. Now, each person is there for a set amount of months. After every month, everybody is, like, shifted around. If you don't kill your roommate, you're stuck with the same roommate for the next month. If you do kill your roommate, you get a new roommate the next month. Cool? Awesome. Also, if you decide, hey, I'm gonna like take food off of this and save it for later, your room will either become unbearably hot or unbearably cold until you dispose of the food and throw it back down. Basically saying, hey, we're gonna kill you. Whatever way we feel like that day, I guess. The main character, who I forget the name of, but looks suspiciously like Surge from System of a Down, so I'm just gonna name them Surge for this entire review. Surge is basically forced to learn this dynamic of the people within the system as he attempts to survive for about 6 months. This was a volunteer sentence, by the way. He was trying to get a diploma.
Welcome to Prison Cell or College Dorm, the game show where you guess if it's a prison cell or college dorm. First,
that basically implies that people outside of the system don't know what the fuck is going on inside of the system. Further illustrated by the fact that one of the people running this system, who was taking people's applications into it, signed up for it themselves, got in, and realized how fucked up it was. So not even the people running the system are aware of how bad the system is. Now, the characters other than Surge are all pretty much complacent in their position. They basically have adapted themselves into the lifestyle that is this whole entity. Surge comes in there like, hey, this sucks, we should do something about it. But of course he soon realizes, hey, we aren't on the high floor, so we can't really do all that. We don't really have all that. Surge goes from starting off where he attempts to make change by simply asking people to cooperate, and then eventually when he does gain power, he instead focuses outward of the system entirely, looking at the people who run it, and attempts to deliver a message to those people running it, saying how in danger they actually are. The ending, which I will avoid going into because it's a massive cliffhanger that is really hard to talk about because of how surrealist it gets. I will say though, I generally dislike cliffhangers like this, but to me, this one feels pretty justified. Not only do the discussions and themes of the movie play into this idea of not knowing what'll happen after the events, like it lines up with the movie politically. Basically, I feel that the ending of the movie in a really solid way parrots the messaging and the themes of the movie overall. What I mostly ended up enjoying about this movie though, more than anything else, was its dedication to its aesthetic. It's really kind of impossible to describe just how brutalist this movie is in terms of its atmosphere. It feels almost like a liminal space backrooms kind of a vibe. There's this level of attention to detail that makes it really shocking. For example, it's got this one point in the movie where they explain that being on the very top floor is mentally just as bad for you as being on the bottom floor where you're getting no food. And the reason for that is because if you are stuck there for another month after you're on that top floor, what ends up happening is you have nothing left to look forward to because next month you're gonna be on a lower floor. So with that, people will legitimately jump off of their platform down into the depths and kill themselves because they don't want to survive another month on a low floor. There are also points where at the end of the month you will wake up to the sounds of the screams of people finding out that they're on a bottom floor. You also have these characters that are almost uncanny in terms of their archetypal nature. They feel very much designed to be mentor type characters, and so as a result of that, it's very easy to kind of lose yourself in this uncanniness with all of this atmosphere surrounding them. It makes all of these characters just feel off and uncomfortable to watch, which is very much by design in my opinion. There's also like a strange parallel to Dante's Inferno in this movie in terms of these characters. You essentially have three different mentor characters which seem pretty much adjacent to the three mentor characters of Dante's Inferno, or I guess that would be the Divine Comedy, because that's all three stories. Like, you have the first guy who basically is fully adapted into the system and plays along with it, this being the Hell character. And you have the second character who helps to run the system but isn't aware of truly how bad it is, and then they're kind of the Limbo character. And then you have the final character who is very much the person actively trying to change things but just can't manage to, and eventually does manage to, who is the Heaven character. All in all, it was a really solid movie that just kind of like was maybe a bit over the top in its messaging and maybe did drag a little bit, but it was a very intense movie, very much in the same kind of vein as like The Hunger Games or something like that, but with just this very intense atmosphere to it that you really don't get much of anywhere else. Feeling an 8 out of 10. An 8 out of 10 on this one, an 8 out of 10. So from here, I decided, wait, I didn't think those movies were all that scary. I wasn't all that scared by these movies, so I mean, like, come on. I can handle this shit. I can handle this. I'm fine. I'm doing okay. So when I watched Wendigoon's Disturbing Movies Iceberg for inspiration and I saw the poster for Midsommar, I was like, oh, that's a pretty cover. That's a pretty poster. Why don't I watch it? How bad can it be? How bad can it be? Dude. What a good fucking movie, man. I shit you not, as of this point in the list, and for a good foreseeable future in the list, this is just my favorite movie. Like, not even in horror, this is just my favorite movie. That's just what this is. This is just my favorite movie now.
So, I'm a liar, right? I'm a big fat fucking liar. This isn't my actual favorite movie of all time. That would be The Lion King. I fucking love The Lion King. Shouts out The Lion King. Anyway, yeah, you can go ahead. Watch the video now. Awesome.
This movie is definitely a movie that won't land for a whole lot of people because of the very niche level of horror that this movie attempts to tap into. But for the people that this movie will click with, it'll click. Trust me. This is probably the first movie on the list that really taps into this folk horror aesthetic. And I just fell in love with this shit, honestly. Looking back on it, this movie was actually probably the entry point for what would eventually become a fascination of mine with these folk horror themes in horror movies. In fact, I had already listened to a lot of music that kind of adopted this folk horror aesthetic. For example, Sinner Get Ready and Caligula by Lingua Ignota. But I had never truly seen that adapted into a horror format, or a movie format for that matter. Now, oh boy, we're gonna talk about the plot. Oh boy, we're going to talk about the plot. This movie follows a college couple with a boyfriend who is very toxic and is hesitant to check out of their relationship. He's kind of just over it. He doesn't want to be with this person, but feels morally obligated to because the person that he is with is, at the time, pretty unstable. This instability of their partner is elevated tenfold when their bipolar sister murders their fucking parents and herself. Just like fully game ends the whole fucking family. The protagonist, whose name is Danny, she is basically left clinging on to this relationship because it's her only outlet left. I will say the one singular complaint that I have about this movie is that I don't know how healthy this portrayal of bipolar people really is. I don't think that it necessarily portrays bipolar people in the best light possible. I think that this is kind of stretching it a lot, and so I don't think I'm all that educated to make a take on that for sure, but just know that I don't know how to feel about it, and I would love someone who is much more educated than me to tell me how to feel about it. I don't know. It just kind of like rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Now, 6 months later, this couple, decide to take a trip to what eventually becomes a weird murder pagan cult thing. This movie is set almost entirely in the open. The whole setting from that point forward just has this very dreamlike quality to it. In fact, from what I've heard of people talking about this, which I agree with, this is probably one of the most brightly lit horror movies ever created. All of the cult members have these white outfits and flowery aesthetics that feel almost angelic in nature. What we eventually learn is that the friend of the boyfriend who is in this cult brings them there with the intention of killing all of them, and yeah, this is all an intentional scheme by that friend to just kill all of them, I guess, in a once every 90-year festival called the Midsommar Festival. Who go into Midsommar 2024, you guys? I heard Playboy Cardi's on the lineup. Destroy Lonely, Danny, by luck, in this festival, ends up in a pretty high position in this cult thing. She's essentially placed in this position in the cult where, after losing her entire family, she finds a supplement for that family loss in this cult. This is something that is only contributed to when she is basically manipulated into thinking that her boyfriend cheated on her for a cult member, when in reality he was just like,
Grapes.
After that, she is basically forced to kill her boyfriend or a random cult member, whichever one she feels like. And oh boy, she felt a certain way. She felt something, That's for sure. She kills the boyfriend. One of the biggest themes of this movie is the use of manipulation and gaslighting as a tactic to make someone feel a certain way. And this applies not just to the characters within the movie, but the audience themselves. For example, there are points in the movie where like Danny's crying is completely cut off, or like the very clear nature of the movie focusing in on Danny's successful climb up in the cult while her boyfriend is basically shoved off to the side, not only by the cult, but also the things that are being shown to us as the audience. And so as a result, what I found as I was discussing this film with other people is a lot of people felt as though the movie has a good ending where the bad guy boyfriend dies and Danny now has a family within this cult. But I don't think that's that good of an ending, honestly. I think it's kind of a sad ending because she still got fucking like manipulated into this fucking cult. Like she's just stuck there. Yeah, like sure, maybe she's like happy, maybe, but like, are we sure that she's just not gonna get like turned into a meat pie, which happens in this movie, by the way? Are we sure that like she's not just gonna get like blood eagled in a week? But I mean, we also see this manipulation happen to the characters themselves. For example, there is a ingenious scene where Danny is being like just fully love bombed by the friend of the boyfriend who's in the cult. His name is like Pele. Pele basically like gaslights and love bombs his way into Danny's heart and basically just cucks her boyfriend entirely, which is kind of funny. This movie is also a fucking drug trip of a film, by the way. No, like seriously, the amount of drug use in this film is absurd. And you see all types of drug use in this film too, from prescriptions such as like antidepressants and the use of like melatonin pills to help sleep and stuff like that, to the very heavy use of psychedelics in the film. Pretty much everybody is drugged up left and fucking right. If you skip to just any point in the movie, 9 times out of 10, at least one character in the frame is high. But not only that, the types of drugs being used alters the camera work in the film. Sometimes this is with the antidepressants, which appear in the very beginning of the film, where you have these very cold, desolate shots of an empty apartment room. It feels very much like a depressive entry point into the film, which is influenced by the type of drug being used in that scene. Or you have more clear-cut cases of that, such as the first scene with psychedelics, where they're just very off texturing things, and eventually one hallucination of Danny's dead sister. There are also mysterious love potions, which is basically just lemonade with period blood in it, which is cool. That sounds awesome. God forbid women have hobbies, am I right? But perhaps the most just drug trip of a scene is that one scene I was talking about where Danny is convinced that fucking her boyfriend is cheating on her. This is the weirdest fucking sex scene of all fucking time, man. This dude is drugged up to death and is almost definitely being raped here. While these naked women are like standing around in a fucking chain around the sex scene, singing some like folk hums, some like Appalachian folk hums, and then eventually, like as things get closer to finishing, they start to mimic the woman as she gets closer to the thing, and then eventually people start helping them get to the thing, including an old woman who starts to push on a person and their specific body part to make it go faster. I don't even have a punchline for that. I can't even come up with a punchline for that. What the fuck, man? Another thing that I noticed with this movie and would continue to notice with Ari Aster's other 2 movies that I would eventually see. I won't be talking about Beau is Afraid, by the way. One thing that I noticed is the portrayal of grief that Ari Aster has in his works. Everything in his movies feels so viscerally real and intense and personal. Something that you don't really see in not just other horror movies, but in any movie besides something he directs. There's just this such intense uneasiness to the portrayal of grief that he has in this filmography of his. But also, the fucking soundtrack of this movie is just incredible. The ending, like 12 minutes, is just this orchestral ballad, almost like a montage of sorts with this ending where you watch as some insane shit happens. Some crazy shit happens. It just has such a horrible feeling about it. It's this blissful soundtrack, but it eventually dements and distorts as it goes on, as you like realize the true brutality of what is happening here. There's sour notes that are played occasionally, but then eventually it all just resolves out as you zoom in on Danny's face going from sobbing in tears to having this like almost heavenly and blissful smile. It is one of the best endings, in my opinion, to any movie that I've ever seen. I'm feeling a 10. Fourth movie, y'all. Fourth movie. We're talking about the GOAT, James Wan's Malignant. Dude, what a fun movie. I feel like I've said that about all of the movies so far, but god, this movie's so fun, dude. This movie feels like James Wan following up Aquaman, having that be a huge fucking success, and then just getting a ton of money to just fuck off on camera. That's what this movie is, and it's glorious in every sense of the word. It is one of the most batshit film experiences you can see ever, and has this breakneck pace to it. It's fucking insane, is what it is. It's insane. Seriously, don't let me spoil this one for you. Don't let me do it. Watch this movie, please. Now, stay with me here on the plot. Just stay with me. We're gonna get through it together, okay? Bear with me. This movie follows the main character who, if I'm not mistaken, is named Madison, who turns out had a conjoined twin that was pushed into the back of their fucking skull. This twin, who is a cancerous tumor as well, by the way, is pushed back into their skull and is meant to lie dormant there forever. However, due to a traumatic wound from an abusive individual, the surgical wound that was used to leave this person in the back of their skull opens up, and now they have another face on their back, on the back of their face. And now this other face, this conjoined twin, who's evil as well, by the way, they're evil too, they're now awakened, and now these two twins have to fight for control over the same body. Oh yeah, also the conjoined twin gives them super strength and has telekinetic powers. There's that too. So, this movie, as I said, is fucking glorious. It's incredible. It's genius is what it is. It's fucking genius. This movie knows exactly what it's trying to do. And it plays into this just absurdly melodramatic and campy atmosphere. And it's just so fun, man. It just sells you on its ingeniously absurd concept immediately. There are like these paranormal and sci-fi aspects to the movie that are left completely vague and completely unexplained, which is very much by design. You aren't supposed to think about this movie at all. You really shouldn't think about this movie. Gabriel, who is the evil conjoined twin, is able to like talk through radios and cell phones and like make the lights flicker on and off. He also at points causes lights to like explode and shit, and that's just never explained. He's just a conjoined twin. Like, how does he have the ability to do that shit? Like, he shouldn't be able to do that shit, but he just does because the movie is fucking awesome. Gabriel also has some absurdly brutal fight scenes, which, I mean, these fight scenes don't make sense because it's just some 27-year-old's body. And not only that, but in order to take control of the body, Gabriel basically twists every single bone backwards and just walks backwards and moves backwards in this body, but somehow has the martial arts gods just backing him up. There's even like a joking bit at the end of the movie where she takes back control over her body, lifts up an entire fucking hospital bed with one fucking hand or whatever, and her sister, her stepsister who's there, asks how she's been able to do it and says, Gabriel's been using my body the whole time. I've always had this strength, which is so goofy and so absurd, and it's, oh my god, man. There's also this one jail fight scene, which, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. This is one of the most insane things I've ever seen in a movie. Ever. There's also this one line in the movie that, just by me mentioning there's a line in the movie, if you've seen the movie, you know what line I'm talking about. It's at the end of the movie, and trust me, if you haven't seen the movie, just that line alone is worth the price of admission. I won't say it here because I don't want to spoil the line for you, but just know when I heard this line, I like belly laughed. It's fucking hilarious. It is one of the most absurd things you will ever hear in a film with a budget more than $2. You have to like see it to believe it kind of shit. Again, I won't say it here, but if you know, you know. According to my understanding too, this movie is kind of playing off of things like Giallo films, which I haven't seen because this is only the 4th horror movie I've ever seen, but that's just what I've heard. So yeah, I'm feeling a 9 out of 10 on this one. Good shit. Had a fucking blast. If you're looking to have a good time with a movie, watch Malignant. We're gonna talk about one more movie. We're on the last movie, you guys. Last movie. This movie is called Deathgasm. For those of you aware of this movie, you're probably yelling at your screen right now, "That's not even a horror movie! That's not even a horror movie! Come on, man, that's not even a horror movie!" To which I say, go fuck yourself. No, honestly, I thought I'd just kind of give myself a pass when I was coming up with like the list here, because it seems horror adjacent enough, even though it's technically a comedy, and I don't fucking care either. I just also don't care. This movie, in a similar way to Malignant, is fucking awesome. It takes elements from franchises such as like Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Lemonade Mouth or Scott Pilgrim in terms of this very cartoonishly goofy high school aesthetic. It takes those styles and that very much loser high school who starts a band kind of a vibe and implements that into themes of like Satanism and occultism, specifically how that relates to the metal music scene. This is a movie about metal music and that kind of shit, and it's done absurdly well. It combines these themes of horror, of music culture in a way that's just such a sight to behold. It's just this seamless comedy that is really enjoyable to watch. Don't get me wrong too, this movie definitely has a lot of the trademarks of a standard horror film. It's definitely horror adjacent, but it's at the very least not taking itself seriously in the slightest. Not enough anyway to be legitimately scared by what's happening on the screen. It sets out to create this world that feels like every single thrash and black metal album cover come to life. I'm gonna avoid going into detail on the plot of the movie, mainly because A, that's not the focus of the movie. The plot itself is just so absurd that that's not the point. And then also because the narrative is as absurd as it is, it has a level of suspension of reality that I can't really do justice by simply explaining to you. If I explained the plot to you, you'd think, oh, this sucks, why do you enjoy this? So I can't really do that here. I mainly just kind of want to like sit here and just gush about it for a solid minute or two. Dude, there is a zombie demon Iggy Pop knockoff. There is a teacher who vomits up blood on people. There are metalhead warriors with corpse paint killing zombie demons with
Male replicative objects as well as various other figures and tools.
There's a zombie demon dad who pulls out his eyes, holds them up in both of his hands, and says, "I can see you!" Like some fucking Pan's Labyrinth type shit. And that is all before this zombie dad gets crushed by a fucking car engine. Genuinely, this movie is just filled with so much goofy shit that I can't even describe it here. It makes you wonder how this movie was able to get greenlit by anybody. It's just like this amazing movie that goes to this cartoonish level of extremity. I really don't have much else to say besides that. Oh yeah, I do have something else to say about this. The director kind of sucks, maybe. I don't know about this. I don't know the situation. I watched this before I knew there was a situation. I still don't really know about the situation, but it's possible the director kind of sucks. So, arg, matey. Overall though, I'm gonna say I'm feeling 8 out of 10 on that one. I'm feeling an 8 out of 10. And with that, those are my first 5 horror movies. 95 more to go. 95 more to go. Thank you for watching. This is a series that I'm really excited to keep diving into. Like I said, I've watched the first 25, and the 25 is technically 2 movies, so I guess like 26. If you like these kind of movie-based videos, let me know. I might make more of them. I have enjoyed talking about it. I'm usually not one who watches a whole lot of movies, so the fact that I have an excuse to is really kind of fun. And on top of that, I have legitimately been really enjoying my dive into horror. I consider myself to be a pretty big horror fan now, which is something I couldn't have said a year ago. And so I'm really happy to be sitting here talking about this shit. Again, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. I make music. I do streams sometimes bi-weekly, Mondays and Wednesdays at 1. I think it's CST, I'm not sure. I do have an album, like I said, that's dropping September 22nd. So watch out for that. I don't know if that'll be up by the time this video goes out, but it might be. So the next video I make after this is going to be the Halloween special. It's going to be the Halloween special. I'm going to be covering a Disturbing Songs Iceberg that I made. I'm really excited for that one. I've been having such a fun time writing the script for it. I think it's at like 14 pages now, and man, I'm just like having such a blast with it. I love talking about music shit like this. Also, for the next video, I'm hoping to have a maybe slightly better microphone setup so it won't sound as egregiously horrible as normal, which might be exciting. Don't know if I'm gonna hold true to that or not, but we're gonna see. But yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. He's been feeding on your fetuses to build himself back up!